Hey guys, it's the Korean Vegan here at the Feedfeed on a Snapchat takeover. I am so excited to join you today to show you my chocolate mint julep cupcakes. These are totally vegan and these are in honor of National Mint Julep Day, which happens to be today. I didn't know that either. So just some vital statistics. This is my Instagram account, the.korean.vegan, because the Korean Vegan was taken. But you can find me on Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook at the Korean Vegan, all one word. And you can also find the recipe for today's demonstration. Just a little bit about myself. I'm Korean American. I'm from Chicago. I am a lawyer by day and a food blogger also by day. And as my name would suggest, I do vegan or plant-based recipes, dairy-free, egg-free, and butter-free. And I love to bake. All right, so without further ado, the first thing we're going to do is line our cupcake tin with some parchment paper like this. Pro tip, vegan baking tends to be pretty sticky, so I'm also going to spray them with some non-stick spray. All right, so I am not a, culinarily trained cook. I learned everything from Food Network and YouTube. But one thing that I did pick up from the pros is using a scale as opposed to these to measure your ingredients. I know it can seem a little bit like pretentious, but it's actually so much easier. So I'm gonna do that. You guys can use cup. So what I'm gonna do is actually put my bowl right on the scale there, and then I'm gonna use the T-A-R-E or tare button to bring it. When I'm like totally old school, I use these like handwritten recipe cards because I'm not good at following recipes with like mobile devices. According to my recipe card, we're starting with 180 grams of all-purpose flour. That also is a cup and a half, so I'm just measuring that out here. Next, we're going to add about a cup of sugar. I kind of like it less sweet, so I use about like 185 to 190 grams. The next major dry component is cocoa powder, and that's 59 grams or half a cup. Next, we're going to add a lot of little ingredients. We're adding 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda. And then we're going to add a teaspoon of baking powder. So just to make sure you understand baking soda and baking powder for the baking noodle. And finally, we're going to add a half a teaspoon of just regular salt, if I can ever manage to get it out. Now we're going to give this all a good stir with the whisk. This is one of those steps when I first started baking I would routinely ignore because I was like, well, honestly, what difference could that make? It actually makes a difference. What you don't want is like clumps of baking soda in your cupcake. I'm actually bringing this to a Memorial Day barbecue later, and like I really don't want someone to be like, ew, there's like something clumpy in my cupcake. So people often ask, what's the difference between baking powder and baking soda? Baking powder puffs and baking soda spreads. All right, so now we're gonna start adding some wet ingredients. The first thing I'm doing is adding a shot of espresso. I'm adding 3/4 of a cup of water. You can also just add 1 cup of coffee if you don't have an espresso machine. I'm adding half a cup of oil. I'm just using canola oil here. That's my oven. Next, I'm gonna add about a 1/4 cup of bourbon. This is, after all, National Mint Julep Day, right? Oh, yeah. I'm gonna add 1 tablespoon of pure vanilla extract. I'm going to add a teaspoon of mint flavoring. A little bit goes a long way, so be careful with this stuff. And finally, I am going to add the now famous, written about in the New York Times, aquafaba, or bean juice. So before I add it to my wet ingredients, I'm actually going to measure out 3 tablespoons into a little bowl. And I am just going to start whisking it a little bit like this. Okay, so we're not talking like stiff peaks or anything like that, just a little frothy, and we're just gonna add it to our ingredients. All right, now we're just gonna start stirring everything together until it forms into a batter. So again, pro tip, you don't want to over stir, but you also don't want like powder like that. So you want to make sure it's fully. All right, so this looks about right. Now we are going to scoop them into our cupcake cups. Super easy, right? So I like to use an ice cream scoop just because it's easier. I know like a lot of professional people do this and you don't have to, you can use a spoon. But like, for example, you can just do this and then, you know, do the lever thingy, and it just comes out like way easier than using 2 spoons. The other benefit to using an ice cream scooper is that you get basically the same amount in each cup so that it all bakes evenly. So just a note, on my Facebook, my recipe also includes a 1.5 teaspoons of cider vinegar. You do not need to add that. So back in the day, before like, you know, aquafaba was like the thing, vinegar took the place of eggs. Specifically, the vinegar would actually react with the baking soda to give you that poof that you would otherwise need eggs for. I found that aquafaba is a fine replacement for that, and some people really don't like the taste of vinegar because they're sensitive to it. But if you like super high, like poofy cupcakes, I would go ahead and add a little bit of vinegar just to give it that extra. And if it wasn't clear when I said high, I meant like, you know, rise, not the other high. All right, so the recipe is definitely enough for 12 cupcakes, but I only have like 6 at a time. So I'm gonna go ahead and bake these. Another pro tip, for the first 7 minutes, you're going to bake these at 400 degrees, and then you're going to bring that temperature down to 350. You're going to bake it at 350 for about 15 to, I would say, 20 minutes. You want to keep your eye on the oven starting at 15 though. All right, so while my cupcakes are baking, I'm going to take some time to clean my cooking space. This is, again, advice I used to routinely ignore. I feel like, what's the point? You're just going to get it messy again. But I found that this is just conducive to better cooking. This is particularly when you're baking because there are a lot of ingredients, measurements, and the more cluttered you become, the more likely you're going to make a mistake. So now, while the cupcakes are baking, we are going to work on the buttercream mint frosting. We're going to start with 1/2 cup of dairy-free butter at room temperature. Again, the whole like room temperature thing, something that I totally used to ignore and be like, whatever, who has got like time to wait for butter to get room temperature? But as I quickly learned, the reason it needs to be room temperature is because later when you beat it, you don't want like sugar flying in your face, which is what will happen. As you guys can see, I am using my KitchenAid stand mixer. You don't have to use a stand mixer. You can use a hand mixer with like these thingies. And you're just gonna beat it on low to medium, like that, until it gets nice and creamy. FYI, this is the brand of vegan butter that I use. You can also use Earth Balance. I just prefer Miyoko's because she's amazing. All right, so when the butter is kind of like this consistency, like nice and creamy, you're now gonna start adding in the powdered sugar little by little. And start it at low speed because you don't want the powdered sugar flying all over the place. Just add it a little bit by little. So I'm actually putting my powdered sugar through a sieve because it's really clumpy, and you don't want a clumpy frosting, that's ugly. All right, so I added about 1 cup of powdered sugar. You can add probably up to 2 cups depending on how sweet you like it. One thing you want to do in the middle is to stop the mixer and just go down the sides. Make sure that that powdered sugar gets incorporated. All right, so the cupcakes are done baking. Check them out. The incredible rise. They are so gorgeous. They smell amazing. All right, so back to the frosting. I am now going to add just a trickle of non-dairy milk at room temperature. And I honestly cannot stress the importance of room temperature because if you use cold milk, it's going to separate and you'll get gross froth. All right, now we're going to add the green color to this buttercream frosting. I'm using matcha, which is an all-natural coloring. I'm actually only going to add about 1 teaspoon because I don't want it to be too green. I want it to be kind of like pale green. And then I'm going to add about 1/2 teaspoon of that mint flavor again because, again, I don't want like toothpaste on my... All right, it's at this point that you are required to taste the frosting. And it's amazing. So those are the cupcakes that I took out of the oven like 10 minutes ago. They're still quite warm. And what is so important before you frost is that they are completely cool. You want to be able to touch it and say, oh yeah, like they're not warm at all. The reason is because you don't want the frosting to melt. So this cooling thing used to be yet another instruction I would ignore, but trust me, you want to let it cool for at least an hour. Now, lucky for you guys, I'm not going to make you wait an hour. I actually woke up at like 5 in the morning and made 12 cupcakes so I could use them here. Now, there are all sorts of ways you can frost your cupcake. The easiest, obviously, would be to just take a spoon, take the back of the spoon, and just... I picked up some fresh mint leaves from the grocery store. You can garnish your beautiful cupcake like that. Yeah, it's super simple. You're not doing anything fancy, but I think it looks great and I promise you it will taste awesome. The other thing you could do, of course, is use a piping bag and just pipe the frosting onto your cupcake. So as you can see, my piping skills need a little bit of work, but you get the idea. And then again, just add a little bit of mint for garnish. Finally, one last trick with the frosting. You could actually stick the tip in and squeeze. Bring it up. You get a nice little rosette at top, and then when you cut into the cupcake, you get a nice little surprise. Fun. There you have it. They're like super easy, so delicious, and they'll be fun for National Mint Julep Day and Memorial Day. So thanks everyone for joining me here on the Feedfeed, and thank you for the Feedfeed for even giving me this opportunity to share with you my passion. And just a reminder, if you guys are interested in more plant-based vegan recipes, you can find me at The Korean Vegan and on Instagram and Facebook.